Yeah.
Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau. But we'll get to us in a second. If you're watching this, we really want to throw out some props to our guest, Joshua Pruett, whose book, Gyro and the Argonauts, is going to be in stores June 17th. That's right, June 17th. So hopefully you're watching this in time to check it out, to pre-order it, to get it into your cart. And if you're watching this after its release, it's probably still available. So put it in your cart. Check it out. You'll enjoy it. Someone in your family, your friends group will enjoy it. Gyro and the Argonauts, aka the best book ever written. Josh will talk about where that asterisk on the book title comes from. He'll talk about the origins of the book's journey, and to be fair, his journey. So again, Gyro and the Argonauts, pronounced hero. We think you'll enjoy this conversation. Pete and I always love talking to Josh. Here we go. If you don't remember, so this is the way podcasts would work. I'll do the introduction. And then I'll introduce you as a guest on the Fan2Fan Podcast.
I'm going to introduce myself. This is Josh's back.
I'm going to sit here silently as quality control.
I have, so I've killed Pete and he's dead and I've taken over his spot.
Pete's dead.
Also, Bernie has no tongue anymore. Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I am Josh and I'm a fan of myself. Thank you for coming.
That's right. This is going to be fun. Folks are listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast. That was Josh Pruett, Fan2Fan Hall of Famer. Pete, the disembodied voice that's purportedly dead, still made an appearance. So, Pete, great work there.
Thanks. The obituary hasn't been written just yet. The ink's not dry.
Wait, aren't all podcasts disembodied voices? Bernie, I'm confused.
In a way, yes. I was going to give you a nice transition, Josh, and say if that obituary needed to be written, the person who should probably write it is Emmy-winning writer, New York Times bestselling author Joshua Pruett, who's worked on, here you go, folks, Doctor Who, Mystery Science Theater 3000, Phineas and Ferb, Last Kids on Earth, Last Comics on Earth, has some projects that he's worked on that we're going to talk about today. So, Josh, I think you would have some fun with Pete's obituary if the time came. You've written for a lot of different mediums.
Things.
If I remember right, I think was it the Jungle Book adaptation that you kind of initially worked on?
Yeah. So the Scott Peterson and I, frequent guest of Fan2Fan Podcast, and my one of my dearest friends and writing partner, Scott Peterson, head writer and co-producer on Phineas and Ferb, and Emmy award-winning producer of the Last Kids on Earth animated series. He and I were actually working on Haunted Mansion at the time, in development at TV animation on Haunted Mansion, and Scott got an offer to adapt or do the novelization. So this would be a tie-in novel is what they called. And where we took the screenplay for the Jon Favreau Jungle Book and turned it back into a book. And actually the book that we're also going to talk a little bit about tonight, Gyro and the Argonauts, I had written that first I wanted to prove to myself that I could write a novel. So this was quite a few years ago. And because I had written the first draft of Gyro, then I felt confident enough to do this thing with Scott. So it ended up being a real fruitful exercise. So Scott and I split the script in half. Every scene became a chapter, and the challenge specifically was to kind of get into Mowgli's head, because that's kind of a staple of middle grade books. And you have a chance to, decompress some of the storytelling, get into people's emotions and thoughts. And then, so we wrote the sections and then we traded. So we traded sections and we kind of rewrote each other. And it was kind of based on that. It was like, oh, okay, maybe we can write stuff together, in the prose space. At the time, we had this really ambitious plan where the TV special we were going to do for Haunted Mansion, we had planned 3 of them. We knew what the stories were, and we wanted to pitch novels. So adaptations of those TV specials, and then there would be books in between them. Because our instinct was that, Disney's probably going to want to, franchise this out. could we get in front of that? And so Scott and I actually broke down the stories for like 6 books, and I did like mock covers for the whole thing. It was a really big, like, middle grade, spooky adventure series. And we pitched it. They were thrilled. And then they fired us. The director kind of got us fired from the entire project. And so that also meant that we weren't doing the books, and they ended up doing some of the books without us. And in fact, one of and this is no slight against the writer who did this series, but some of the elements that ended up in the Marvel series, Haunted Mansion, some of those things actually came from our initial pitch. So there were folks at Imagineering who were privy to what we were doing in-house. And so some of those things got translated. It is not a quote-unquote ripoff. Again, this has nothing to do with that writer. But there were things that were seeded that came from our pitch. So that was a rough stretch there. But what ended up happening is that then we pitched an original. We actually pitched 2 or 3 ideas, and the thing that floated to the surface was The Shipwreckers, The Curse of the Cursed Temple of Curses, or We Nearly Died a Lot. The original title was Or We Nearly Died a Lot. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of writing. I would say the book is 95% of what our intention was and our first draft was. This was with Disney Hyperion. But if we had gotten to do the Haunted Mansion, we wouldn't have written Shipwreckers. So kind of in a roundabout way, like that ended up being better. And I think by the time that they fired us off of Mansion, it really wasn't ours anymore. So I think hindsight is very much, like 2020. And so I think at this stage, both Scott and I are like, oh yeah, like that was not, if we would have been still on that thing, it would not have been a good experience. So both of us ended up on Milo Murphy's Law. But it's in the world of prose, it was like, hey, if we do well on this Jungle Book thing, maybe we can do more stuff and do originals. So it was a great obstacle course. It was a great kind of trial by fire doing Jungle Book, and then that created the opportunity for Shipwreckers.
I think that's probably the through line as we've gotten kind of to know each other with a lot of your stuff, Josh, is that I only knew you, like when we first started talking, right? It was our mutual love of Mystery Science Theater.
You bet.
And your foolishness in replying to the email that I sent. So thank you again.
That is also a recurring theme. I am often replying to emails foolishly.
That's all right. But that was the initial conversation where you worked on the animatic for the new intro when Mystery Science Theater rebooted. But because of your love of the show, you got to write on the Beast episode.
Beast of Hollow Mountain.
And that... I think that's where I've kind of seen, again, as we've gotten to know each other, and especially someone with, their own IMDb page. I don't know many of those people, but in getting to know you, Josh, I'm like, I feel like I've gotten a sense of like what you like and what's inspired you and the kind of dad jokes that Shipwreckers is like the part of the foundation, but there's equal part Sam Raimi, and you work on Phineas and Ferb, and you get to throw in your love for Romero and zombies in there. And you get to work on Last Comics on Earth, and obviously your love of comics gets to show up. So I think with a lot of the stuff you do, it feels like whether it works out works out purposely this way or not, you can't help but have some of what is you seem to come up to the surface within the projects.
Definitely. And I appreciate that, Bernie. Like it's really, it does mean something to me. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it kind of just happens automatically. But I think, I kind of wear my geek heart on my sleeve. And
you do have the jumpsuit with all the patches, which literally has all of the Geek patches on your sleeve.
Shamelessly,
he is wearing an awesome Godzilla and Mechagodzilla shirt right now.
And a full moon Video Zone hat.
Yeah,
with a patch on it that I had made with my own money. So like,
and a stuffed poster to the side.
Again, in the world of disembodied head podcasting with visual cues.
That's right.
Let's take 10 minutes to just talk about what Josh has got going on around him in his.
He does have a TARDIS in the background. Again, it has zombie TARDIS, so that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Assorted VHS, DVDs stacked in every haphazard way possible, as any good collector should, because new things are coming into the collection, and then new things are being put into...
They are.
Absolutely.
With some steady regularity.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And like, I think what I realize is that I want to live in a video store. It wasn't just enough that I worked in 2 of them. I think at some point that represented a nascent developmental stage of my life that was very rich, and so I think without realizing it, that's what I built my office to be. But yeah, man, I'm wearing my Geek, flying that Geek flag proudly.
I was gonna ask Josh, like, how much of you kind of bringing your essence to the stuff that you work on is or was by design? How much of it is just kind of like the opportunity has presented itself where like, oh, these people seem really cool, they don't mind me flying my Geek flag, so I'm going to fly it. What is there a ratio, is there an alchemy to the I want my career to be this way, or is those things have opened themselves up to allow my career to be this way?
I think it's definitely both, and I think that's a great question, because some of the things are things that I ran after and hunted down and tied up and strung up, and that I really went after them. Other things kind of meandered their way my direction. It's actually it's a great segue, Pete, to Gyro and the Argonauts.
Chapter 1: The Foreshadowing Giant. The giant had 100 arms. Seriously, go ahead and count them. They're all there. 1, 2, 3. Actually, you know what? Never mind. Let me help you, or else this book is never going to get started. 4, 5, 6, 7, 100. Moving on. The giant had 100 arms, but he was called the 100-handed giant. No one knew why. It just was. 100-handed giants don't get asked a lot of questions, mostly due to their 100 fists being so good at squishing people who get close enough to ask silly questions or attempt to count their arms, both of which slow the beginning of books down to a crawl. In the lean dawn of morning, the giant swung his many arms as he marched down the edge of the countryside. Birds flew circles around his shoulders, catching currents from the updrafts his movements made. He was like a walking windmill, stacks of arms moving in sync, churning the air around him, like only a true titan of the earth could. And this titan was in a hurry. The giant had someplace to be, and that someplace was the hero contest.
So I have a book that I've mentioned a little bit here on the show in previous episodes, but now we are very close to its release. It'll be out June 17th of this year, and I couldn't be more excited about this.
And again, you have to say the full title, Josh.
Yes,
You're
sir.
giving short shrift to the titles because
yes, sir.
Gyro and the Argonauts, aka the best book ever written. So,
aka the best book ever written, asterisk about a kid named after a sandwich.
That's called a setup, folks. That's called a setup. I purposely didn't say the last part so Josh could say it. So thank you for playing this game.
Correcting Bernie. Whether it's people who write music for full moon movies or it's the full title of my book. Thank you,
I'm
Bernie.
definitely hungry right now. I'm hungry to learn more about this book.
So the book is about the first Greek geek in history. And it's about him getting the opportunity to join his favorite heroes, the Argonauts. And what he discovers is that they're all buttheads. And it turns out it's the monsters who are actually the only characters that have any dignity or class. And spoiler alert, Gyro realizes that not everything the poets tell you is true. And that when you put people up on a pedestal and they fall, it breaks your heart. And he ends up teaming up with the monsters to go after the Golden Fleece themselves. Because I always thought the monsters were the most interesting characters in Greek mythology.
Also helps that we all grew up on loving Ray Harryhausen.
And that's it. That's 100% it.
Yeah. You've got your main character butting up with Medusa and Cyclops. I mean, come on. We were looking at Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah.
And like, I was kind of rooting for the skeletons.
Clash of the Titans. Yeah, we're all rooting for the skeletons. Again, those guys were kind of butthead. But to your question, Pete, like what I didn't realize, this was like I had written the book. The first draft took me a year to outline it. First draft took me a couple years to actually get down on paper because I'd never written a novel before. My outline was 1 page per chapter, so I could track everything. And when I'd finished writing it, 5 or 6 years later, I've been trying to sell it for years. It's gone through a number of rewrites. When I rewrote it, I realized that the hero worship thing was actually about my time at DreamWorks. And I didn't know it until I had rewritten the book. And kind of the fact that Gyro is a geek, I mean, he's really me. And I had a lot of experiences at the studio, Pete, where like, you know, I'm pitching, you know, geeky things. You know, I'm oversharing, you know, my monster movie knowledge or, you know, my knowledge about comic books or whatever. And, you know, it was not always appreciated. And, you know, definitely my first movie, Monsters vs. Aliens, you know, the fact that I was the resident monster guy was not always looked at like an asset. You know, I had, I think, a really special, really good experience on that show, and I really grew a lot working on that movie. Actually, someone at WonderCon recently asked me for commission of Ginormica, and I have not drawn her in 17 years. So that was fun. That was an adventure. But yeah, like I think going through that experience and being a young person who has these great big dreams and kind of wants to work and with his heroes and, you know, wants to, you know, write movies and storyboard and write books and do all these things, you know, not everyone is going to respond positively to my big fluffy Labrador enthusiasm and as it has been described to me. I'm often that's often my dynamic with Scott, where he is the experienced dog who has seen it all and done it all and doesn't need to talk all the time. And I'm that young Labrador puppy who's going, what are we doing now? What are we doing next? Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. And so I'm a little bit the dog off the chain. But yeah, you know, I learned a lot as a young guy starting my creative career. And kind of put a lot of those themes into this book. And, you know, certainly from, you know, my description, it's going to sound a little more serious. It's not. It's an absolutely insane book, you know, where I'm making jokes about horse apples. And it's very meta. It's got a lot of, you know, Douglas Adams influence / I'm just ripping him off / trying to do my own version of that. And we'd love to talk a little more about that. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question, Pete. But yeah, I mean, the geekness is very much part of my DNA, and it seems to influence everything that I do.
And I definitely want to get back to Gyro, but just to follow up on that, like when you're going through that, did you have or do you have a North Star kind of like guiding the way as you sail on the Argos across the seas? You know, that's kind of grounding you when you're facing up against people that maybe aren't quite seeing things the same way that you do, and especially early in your career. I'm just curious, like what kept you kind of focused on, like, I'm just going to keep through, this seems true to me, so I'm just going to keep at this, and eventually, hopefully, it comes around to, a more productive experience.
I don't think I knew it at the time. I think I've since realized that there is a delusional aspect, and we've talked a little bit about that on this show, and I've talked about it elsewhere, but I think having a healthy delusion that you can write something that someone's going to be entertained by, I think some of that keeps me going, like keeps me hungry and keeps me wanting to tell more stories. And then I think I was lucky that in the midst of all the growing and stretching and maybe not making a lot of fans, I did have mentors who took time out early on, who did see some potential in me. Folks like Peter Ramsey, who was a director of Spider-Verse, and just an extraordinarily generous man and patient. And guys like Will Finn, who was the co-writer of Secret of Dim and lead animator on Iago and Cogsworth. Really it was, there were folks who just gave me the time of day when they didn't need to. And I think I got lucky, man, because the majority of the people, didn't. So I think sometimes that's what you need. You need the one or two people who are willing to advocate for you behind the scenes. And I think I was really blessed that I did have who I had. There were definitely times where I didn't. There were definitely stages in my career, especially early on, where it's like, oh man, I did not win this person over, or this person does not have my back. And I think it's the kind of lessons that we all learn at different stages. Cause I learned some of that working at CVS. But the part of it that made it fraught was it was like people I admired for, 10 years of my life. So that certainly made it more complicated. Yeah.
It's funny, that feels like the business part that you talk about, Josh, feels like the more adulting aspect of it.
Yeah, very much.
Because I've heard somewhere, I can't think of where it attributes to, someone said like essentially like you're kind of like your worldview starts kind of shaping at around like maybe 7 or 8 years old. And in some ways, for those of us that grew up in the golden age of the 80s with Spielberg and Star Wars and Willow and Laverne and Shirley, there's something that, as much as this stuff is nostalgic for those of us that grew up with it, I think it certainly reflects in not only our worldview, but also in our output and the stuff we do. Because I think that's another through line that you have too, in that a lot of the stuff you work on, and again, like this is something as much a question as much a statement. I'm like, it's obvious, like the stuff you work on obviously reflects you, but it also seems to continually reflect that like middle age, like 8 to 12-year-old audience, but you're not necessarily doing it with like you're doing with a little bit of like Indiana Jones cynicism, like the character that's basically like a buffoon Indiana Jones and Shipwreckers.
Right.
And you're like, what if we kind of play with it, but you're still making things that a young audience, would kind of appeal to, but with an adult sensibility. So yeah, Hamster and Gretel, probably informed by all the superhero stuff you've consumed, but now you get to cherry pick things that you liked, and I'll be like, cool, now I'm going to show a younger audience this stuff, not dumbing it down, but rather relying on their intelligence to catch all the tropes I'm going to be playing with and maybe inverting.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, right? Like, I think I'm perpetually 12, so I do have some self-awareness of that. But that's the goal. I think I'm super interested in making gateway stuff. I'm super interested in and passionate about oh yeah, if I can turn kids on to spooky stuff, if I can turn kids on to science fiction, if I can turn, cause I think what the three of us have learned over the course of sharing like we do and where we have connections and where we connect as people and friends and fans, it's like these things last a lifetime. Like they really do, and they fuel us in all kinds of new ways. I mean, we were just talking offline about our own creative projects and things that you guys are doing, and it's like those are directly influenced and inspired by the things we grew up loving. And like I think there's a richness to that, to mining that vein. And I think it, in some ways, it's like self-perpetuating. It's like, this like engine that just refuels itself because it's coming from a place of joy. It's not coming from strategy or cynicism. It's coming from, oh man, I really like that. I've spent hours of my life living in that place, and I would love to give that to somebody else. I would love to, and again, not as a selfless act necessarily, but the idea is that, like, I love this so much, maybe somebody else will love it too.
So going back to Gyro then with all of this, you've been working on this book for a while.
Long time.
What was the spark? Did Gyro come to you at some point and was like, you need to write about me? And I'm like, okay, yes, I will.
We'll get real for a second and then we'll come out of that. But it actually started off, I was like 19, 20 years old. I had just lost my dad, and I was working at Blockbuster, and I would go to Taco Bell on my lunch break, and neither the Taco Bell or the Blockbuster exist anymore. And like, but Gyro was born as like a film parody. It was actually called Jethro and the Argonauts. So I've actually been working on this thing for 25, 26 years in some form. But it was, much more Brooksian, much more Shrek. And I actually shot some of it with, my, then girlfriend, now wife, Amanda, and her twin, Patrick. We shot it in their garage. We recruited, so I actually have footage of these puppets that my brother.
Oh my God,
Patrick
Josh, you're showing the footage? You're on a podcast. No one's going to see. Oh my God,
again.
This is unbelievable.
That looks awesome, though. I wish
How
people could
did
see
you
that.
get Lou Ferrigno in there? Oh my God.
I can't believe I shared this footage.
Is that a young Chris Hemsworth in the background? Whoa. Is that all the Hemsworth is? Is that a plural? Hemsworths?
What's the multiple Hemsworths?
Yeah,
I'm not sure. A lot.
Hemswhy?
So it started off in a very different way. And then it kind of like evolved over the years. Like I had done a bunch of storyboards. I had written an entire screenplay for this thing. And then the more I came back to it, the story started to move. It started to become a story. And at the time, one of my favorite blogs belonged to John August, the screenwriter. And he did this thing. He just would give out advice. He had some great just tips about things. This was after he had written Go, and then he was doing stuff for Tim Burton, like Big Fish, which I love. But he was saying that, you really know you've got a story when it's got a good ending. And he'd have a lot of folks come up to him and be like, hey, how do I pick my next project to work on? And I was always torturing myself about that. And his advice was like, pick the one with the best ending. He's like, write that first. And I, as I was developing the story over time, I was like, once I figured out the end of the story and how Gyro grows and how we get there, I was like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Like not batting myself on the back too much, but from the standpoint of emotionally, this hits. And if that's the case, then I can make everything else work. It's like I can feel confident about the jokes and the humor and the outrageousness and, the Cyclops being farsighted and being able to smell the future and, Medusa not really being dead and her snakes being huge and they have terrible senses of humor. Like there's all these other things where I'm like, oh, I can do this. But it was about like, what is that through line? And then I was like, oh, there's a story here. There's a story here about this kid who, worships his heroes and then learns something in the process. But yeah, it's weird, Pete. He's been like speaking to me for like 25 years. And at this point, he's probably upset it's taken this long.
and he's still the same size, which is like crazy.
He hasn't grown at all. He's still a kid.
It is like this creative funnel you've had, Josh, like 2 decades plus with the seed that this kind of sprouts from. And that's why in some ways I wanted to have you start talking about Jungle Book on purpose, because I think that might be the touchstone for people who may not have been introduced to Gyro yet, pronounced Hero, by the way. Like they may not be familiar with him, but they've been familiar with your other stuff, right?
Oh,
and
maybe,
then it's been like, here's this book that you worked on that has kind of been like, all right, like blip on a radar. All right, here's another blip. Here's something else. Here's other, IP that you've worked on that people may be familiar with. And here are all the things that have, I think, probably from more a, maybe I would think probably for you, more form, less function. Like you're like, the dad jokes were always there. The sense of humor, the outrageousness you were talking about was there because that was you. But there's something about, oh, now I've written a book. And if you can write one book, guess what? You can write another one.
Yeah.
And if you can do a few jokes for Beast of Hollow Mountain, you can do a few jokes for something else. And I have to imagine like that's the form that you're like, okay, cool. Well, this idea is still good enough to get all the Helmsworths to show up in a garage somewhere in California to shoot this.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, I think the journey that you're describing, I think, is the thing. Like it, and I think what's fascinating to me about it and strange is that it's like by the time it comes out, it'll be like the 10th book that I've had published. But it's the first one I wrote. It was the one that gave me the confidence, because I had written short stories before that. But it was the one that gave me confidence that I could write a novel from beginning to end. It was something I was capable of. And I think to your point, Bernie, I think the other thing about it that is unique is that this is the solo one for Josh. So this is I'm working without a net. I'm not working with Scott. I'm not working with Max Brallier. Like this is me kind of like unadulterated, like a mainline Josh. And so I think it has a lot of the indulgences that I tend to permit myself, and the sentences are too long. And like Scott would probably cut most of them. He had given me notes years ago and I took most of his notes. But like, I think it's kind of the most vulnerable I've ever been as a writer. But I also think it's like the funniest that I've ever been, the most self-aware, and probably the like the most heartfelt maybe that I've ever been. Certainly in print. Yeah, so it's a little scary too. Like I feel a little bit like going up the roller coaster because of that. Because it feels like much more of a Josh thing this time. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what people think of this one.
You should be, Josh. You mentioned Max Brallier.
Yes.
And I did want to throw, so he is I think the self-titled sandwich expert, but the New York Times does call him a number one best-selling series for Last Kids on Earth. He said about the book that comes out on June 17th, not the last time I'll say it, with big laughs, big heart, and big monsters, Gyro and the Argonauts is timeless fun for everyone. And I think, someone that you worked on with Last Comics on Earth. And again, if I think this is like we were saying, right? Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker, Clash of the Titans, Ray Harryhausen, kind of put this in a big stew, and with a lot of heart. That's your book that comes out on June 17th that people can find on Amazon. I still remember picking up Last Comics on Earth at my local Target on like a random weekday morning, going to like the end cap where they had a few copies and be like, hey, I know that guy. Like I can text that guy right now. And it was like a legit proud moment, Josh. I was just like, cool. Like this, I'm hoping that, he has the same experience with his kids and can go in there and be like, hey, comp copies aside, to be able to go to a shelf in a store.
Oh, there's nothing like that. Yeah,
I can't imagine.
That.
Yeah.
No. And kind of all gratitude to Max. Like we've known each other and we're working together for years, and he really was kind enough to kind of recruit me for the Lost Comics journey, and it's been amazing. And to be able to connect with young readers and graphic novel readers, and man, like seeing your book at a Costco where you can get a pizza and a drink and your book for $12, like that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That
especially when it's your book, like you said, you're the solo here. This is your solo guitar riff.
Yeah,
you're like, hey,
this is
check it out.
This is different. Yeah, this is different. So, and it was also really it was designed for reluctant readers too. So I think that's part of this journey is kids have a lot of things competing for their attention. So I think trying to come up with something that is, meta and strange and, simple short chapters that are aware of themselves. And like, I think, my hope is that that's part of why it connects, is because I'm trying to reach out to kids where they're at. It happens that I work the same way. And I think, when we're competing with phones and video games and YouTube, and I think having something that keeps kids reading and doesn't feel like homework, that's the job. And certainly that's what I'm shooting for with Gyro, 100%.
Will probably capture the manic energy that I think a lot of kids have, because that seems to fit your personality to a T with all the stuff that you work on. So I can only imagine, and basing out, to heap some extra praise on Last Comic Standing, I remember picking that up in an indie bookstore when I was living in Phoenix, and I took it home and I showed my girlfriend's son, who was like 16 at the time. And I'm like, I know this guy. He's on our podcast. I'm like, this just came out. It's a bestseller. And he's like, oh, that looks really interesting. I never saw the book again. So
that's the goal.
Yes, exactly. So I guess my question is to you, because you talk about, our careers are linear in one sense, and that, this book is coming out now. But like you said, this was kind of the impetus for you to figure out if you could even write a novel. So it's like, while it may have been the first thing that got you wanting to write in this way, it's coming out now after you've had this established career, which in a way is still kind of linear. I guess, do you look at it as, 15, 10 years, 5 years ago, even, this book probably shouldn't have come out? Now it's coming out now, and now is the right time because it's ready.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And I always struggle with wanting everything now. And I think, there was a hot second where DreamWorks was interested in it as a movie idea. And that was, 2011, 2010. I tried to sell it, off and on over the years. And it took about 5 years. This version took about 5 years to find its home at Andrews McMeel. And I think it worked out perfectly, because I and again, normally I'd be like, no, I wanted it a long time ago. But I think in this case, it's like, I'm a better writer, and I feel like, when we did our revisions and there's things that I was able to fix or add or adjust or, so, that is awesome. And that makes the book better, which is what I want. And yeah, the timing is fantastic, I think, Pete, and I only feel that because I'm here. I for a long time, I felt like, oh man, this thing's just never going to find a home. And so the fact that I can hold it is for podcast audiences, I'm holding the book right now. And it has this incredible cover by my buddy Anthony Holden, and great art by Amanda Castillo on the interior. It's surreal. It genuinely doesn't feel real yet. But yeah, I think now is the perfect time for this to come out, and to be able to have worked in TV and working in comics and things I'll be able to talk to you guys about later this year, and maybe some more comics. It's really an exciting time. And I think it's got a better shot of finding its readers now than it would have at any time over the last 25 years. And like I said, that's not I usually am not that person. And I think being at this stage, and I've shared this on this show before, it's like, we're the only people who care how long it takes. The kids who pick up this book, they're not going to care. Like, and not in a mean or heartless way, but like, that's not part of the agreement. The agreement is you buy my book and I'm going to entertain you and make you feel something. And I think, this is the best version of this book. And that's huge, man. So yeah, God and book gods willing, and Greek gods willing, Gyro will find an audience and will connect,
Maybe not the Greek gods, heard their butt heads.
Some of them are, some of them are. Yeah.
You mentioned Amanda Castillo that did the illustrations. Now, how does that work? Did you seek her out? Is that something? How does that partnership form?
So it was a little bit of both. So Anthony, who did the cover art, he'd been like my dream choice for years. He and I actually worked together at DreamWorks. He's a character designer, cartoonist, storyboard artist. He actually won an Annie Award for boarding the finale of Puss in Boots' Last Wish. So if you guys caught the finale with Death with Wolf, Anthony boarded, and it's just an unbelievable sequence. Anthony's so talented. And my dream for years, even before I had sold this to Andrews McNeil, was getting Anthony to do the cover because I wanted something that had a manga or an anime feel to it. And Anthony has a really wonderful style that he's developed over the years, full of character, full of appeal. But my gut kept telling me that, if this looked like the things that kids watch these days, that they're going to be more apt to pick up something that whether it's mythology or not. But I think more to that, it's like you set tone, right? You get a good cover and you set tone. That's the movie trailer, right? That's the movie preview. And on the interiors, it was like, oh, we're going to go a little different direction, but stay in the same world. And Amanda was actually brought to me by my team. And I think she adds a lot of heart and context to so it's like, again, that covers that movie trailer. And then you get into the book and you get into the prose, you get the language and the story. And Amanda's artwork works as kind of really important punctuation points along that arc. She's got a couple pieces in there that are really striking. The plan is for us to work together again on book 2.
I was going to say, especially with the listing, anywhere you find it, volume 1, I think that, like you said earlier, like the promise that you make to the reader is that you're entertaining them, but you're also hoping that you're entertaining them enough where you can commit to the other promise, which is I will give you a volume 2, and you can find out more about this kid and these monsters and the journey and more journeys. But it's like, yeah, so it's fun to see like volume 1, because I know you've got multiple volumes in you for this.
Yeah, man, for sure. And I'm working on part 2 right now. So I'm actually outlining it right now. Book 2 has zombies.
You almost didn't even need to say that, Josh.
I know. I had to wait a whole book, Bernie, before I could get to that's called restraint.
First it's PETAs, then it's the undead.
Yeah. I mean, it seems obvious,
For us it would. If I do this right, this comes out before June 17, 2025, so folks can buy copies of this, read it for themselves, get it for their kids, their cousins, anyone in their life that really wants to check this out.